You need to leave this park now. The words cut through the morning air like a blade. Jada Whittaker kept her eyes on the baseball field, watching her nephew Finn field a ground ball at shortstop. The metal bleachers pressed cold against her back despite the sun. She did not turn around, did not acknowledge the voice behind her because she knew exactly what would happen if she did. Officer Derek Sloan moved into her peripheral vision, his bulk blocking the exit route between the bleacher rows. His hand rested on his duty belt in that casual way that was not casual at all. "Ma'am, I'm not going to ask twice," he said. Jada finally looked up. "Good morning, officer," she said, keeping her voice level. "Can I ask what this is about?" "We received a complaint," Sloan replied. His eyes scanned her leather work bag, the thermos beside her, the jacket folded neatly on the bench. "ID now." Out on the field, Finn glanced toward the bleachers. Even from across the distance, Jada could see his smile falter. She forced herself to stay calm. "I'm happy to cooperate," she said. "But I need to understand the basis for this stop." Sloane's jaw tightened. "Loitering," he said. "Park rules, no unaccompanied adults." Jada's eyes shifted to the yellow sign posted at the field entrance. The black letters were clear even from this distance. The sign specified restricted hours for loitering. She checked her watch. It was clearly daytime. "Officer, that sign specifies restricted hours," she said. "It's daytime." "Don't get smart with," Sloan snapped. "ID now." Later, when she pulled the 911 logs through the public records request, Jada would see the call that started everything. The caller's voice, preserved in digital clarity, said, "There's a black woman alone at the bleachers. No children with her. She's just staring at the children." The dispatcher's note would be even more damning. "Caller is white female. State subject has done nothing illegal, but feels unsafe." But that was later. Right now, Jada reached slowly for her bag, her fingers brushing past the leather case she had carried for her entire career. The one she could not show him. Not yet. The morning had started, the way every morning started for years. Jada's alarm went off as usual. She woke before Finn, had breakfast ready when he shuffled into the kitchen in his rumpled Little League uniform. "Extra cereal?" Already knowing the answer. "Cereal," Finn mumbled, climbing onto the kitchen stool. "The honey kind." Jada poured the cereal and watched him eat. She had packed his equipment bag the night before, checked his glove, cleaned his cleats. These small rituals mattered. They were the scaffolding that held her life together. "Auntie J," Finn said between bites, "why do people always stare at us?" Jada's hand paused on her coffee mug. "What do you mean, baby?" she asked. "Like at the grocery store yesterday. That lady kept looking at us like she was waiting for something bad to happen." Jada had noticed the woman too. The way her eyes had followed them down the cereal aisle, lingered on Jada's work bag, tracked Finn's movements as if he might suddenly pocket something. "They're just curious," Jada said, hating the lie. "People notice things that are different. Just ignore them." Finn nodded, but his eyes held that look, the one that said he was learning lessons she wished she did not have to teach. They arrived at City Park in her usual spot, 2 spaces from the field entrance. She had chosen it deliberately, close enough to see the field, but with 2 exit routes if needed. The path to the main road was clear on her left. The service road behind the concession stand offered a second option. She noted these things automatically, the way some people notice cloud formations. She had learned long ago that awareness prevented problems. Where civilians saw a peaceful morning, she saw angles, vulnerabilities, escape routes. The bleachers were filling with parents. Jada recognized most by now, though few had learned her name. They clustered in their usual groups, sharing coffee, discussing carpools and weekend plans. Jada sat apart 3 rows up on the visitor side. She could not commit to their rhythms. Her work schedule was unpredictable. She could not promise carpool rides when she might be gone for days. A woman in yoga pants and a pristine white visor approached. Lauren Kensington. Jada had learned her name from the team roster, though they had never spoken. "Hi there," Lauren said, climbing the bleacher steps. "I don't think we've met properly. Are you Finn's mom?" "His aunt," Jada replied. "Jada." Lauren's smile did not reach her eyes. Her gaze dropped to Jada's leather work bag. Professional, expensive. "Oh, how nice," Lauren said. "And what do you do, Jada?" "Government work," Jada said. "Consulting." Lauren's eyebrows rose. "Oh, like social services?" The assumption hung between them. Government work plus black woman plus raising her sister's child equaled social worker, case manager, maybe probation officer. Never anything with real authority, never anything requiring a federal badge. "Something like that," Jada said, offering nothing more. Lauren lingered another moment, her eyes moving from Jada's face to her bag and back. "Well, it's nice to finally chat," she said. "I've seen you here a few times. You always sit alone." "I like the view from here," Jada replied. Lauren retreated to her usual spot among the other mothers. Jada watched her lean close to two women in matching team shirts, saw their eyes cut toward her, saw the whispers start. The sidelong glances, the careful distance, the way people shifted their bags closer when she walked past. Out on the field, Finn took his position at shortstop. He waved toward the bleachers and Jada waved back. He was happy here. That mattered. He had been through enough upheaval. His mother was serving a lengthy sentence for possession with intent, a mandatory minimum that did not care about addiction or desperation. Finn needed stability. He needed to be a kid. Jada opened her thermos and poured coffee. She scanned the field with practiced efficiency. The concession stand had a security camera pointed toward the parking lot, but the angle would not catch the bleachers. A patrol car circled the park regularly. She had timed it over weeks, regular as clockwork. She noted the exits again. 2 clear paths. The field had chain-link fencing on 3 sides, but the 4th side behind home plate was open to the parking area. She could be in her car quickly if needed. Finn fielded a practice grounder cleanly through to first base with that awkward but determined motion of a kid still growing into his arm strength. Jada felt her chest tighten with pride. He was resilient, stronger than she had been at his age. He had adapted to living with his aunt, learned the rules, did not complain about the things they could not afford or the fact that his mom only called once a month from prison. He just kept moving forward, which was why Jada showed up every single time no matter what. Down below, Lauren pulled out her phone. She turned away from the field, walking toward the parking lot with hunched shoulders. Jada watched her thumb move across the screen, saw her glance back towards the bleachers, toward Jada specifically. Something cold settled in Jada's stomach. She had seen this before, not here but in her work. The way people looked when they were reporting something, when they were calling someone, when they were setting something in motion. Lauren's lips moved as she spoke into the phone. Her free hand gestured toward the bleachers. She shook her head at something, then nodded emphatically. Jada set down her coffee. Her instincts were prickling now, that 6th sense that had kept her alive in far more dangerous situations. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the way Lauren kept glancing over, in the deliberate way she had positioned herself, in the urgency of her gestures. Jada told herself it was nothing, just a parent making a phone call, maybe talking about dinner plans or forgotten groceries, maybe complaining about last week's umpire. But her hands moved automatically. Phone fully charged, keys in the side pocket, wallet with ID accessible. The leather case in the interior compartment right where it always was. On the field, Finn caught another grounder. He turned to look at her, his face bright with joy, and Jada waved. She kept the smile fixed even as Lauren finished her call and started walking back, her expression carefully neutral. She told herself it was nothing. She was wrong. A short while after Lauren Kensington's phone call ended, a white patrol cruiser rolled into the parking lot. Jada tracked its movement from her seat on the bleachers, watched it circle once before pulling into a spot near the field entrance. Officer Derek Sloan emerged, adjusting his duty belt with one hand, speaking into his shoulder radio with the other. He did not scan the crowd, did not look for context. He walked directly toward Jada, his trajectory as straight as a bullet. "Ma'am," Sloan said, stopping at the base of the bleachers. "Need to see some ID." Jada kept her eyes on the field for another moment, watching Finn field a practice grounder. Then she turned to face the officer. "Good morning, officer," she said, keeping her voice level. "Can I ask what this is about?" "We received a complaint," Sloan replied. His eyes moved over her leather bag, her thermos, her jacket folded neatly beside her. "ID now." Jada had been through enough interactions to know the game. No articulable suspicion, mentioned no specific complaint, detailed just a demand, backed by the authority of a badge and the implicit threat of what happened to people who did not comply. She could feel the other parents watching now. Conversations dying mid-sentence, heads turning to see what was happening. "I'd be happy to comply with that lawful order," Jada said, emphasizing the phrase slightly. "But I need to understand the basis for this stop." Sloane's expression shifted. That was not the response he had expected. Most people either handed over ID immediately or got defensive and argumentative. Jada's tone was calm, professional, almost procedural. "The basis," Sloane said, his voice hardening, "is that I'm a police officer and I asked you a question. That's all the basis you need." Jada held his gaze. She had filed enough reports to know how this would read later. Subject became argumentative. Refused to cooperate with officers' lawful commands, displayed suspicious behavior warranting further investigation. The narrative was already being written in his head. Each word of her resistance transformed into evidence of guilt. "Officer, I'm not refusing," Jada said. "I'm asking for clarification. What's the complaint?" "You're loitering," Sloane said, gesturing toward the yellow sign at the field entrance. "Park rules, no unaccompanied adults." Jada's eyes followed his gesture. The sign was clearly visible from where she sat. Black letters on yellow metal. The sign specified restricted hours. She checked her watch, deliberately making sure Sloane saw the gesture. "Officer, that sign specifies restricted hours," she said. "It's daytime." "Don't tell me how to read a sign," Sloane snapped. Around them, the atmosphere had changed. The crack of bats hitting balls continued, but the parent chatter had stopped. Everyone was watching now. Lauren Kensington stood near the concession stand, arms crossed, phone still in her hand. Two other mothers had moved closer, whispering behind their hands. Out on the field, Finn glanced toward the bleachers. Even from across the distance, Jada could see his smile falter, see him register that something was wrong. Jada reached slowly for her bag, telegraphing her movements. "I have my driver's license," she said. "And I have the park permit confirmation email on my phone. I'm listed as an authorized adult for the team." "Just the ID," Sloane said. Jada pulled out her wallet, extracted her driver's license, and handed it up to him. Sloane took it without looking at her, tilting the card to catch the light, checking the photo against her features. Then he keyed his shoulder radio. "Copy. I have a black female, Jada Whittaker, at City Park Baseball Field," he said, running for wants and warrants. The words hit Jada like a slap. Running her name through the system was standard procedure for some stops, but doing it out loud, making sure everyone within earshot heard it, that was performance. That was establishing narrative. That was making sure all the watching parents knew that the police were checking if she had a criminal record. Jada's jaw tightened. She could end this right now. Flashed the credential case in her bag, watched Sloane's face drain of color, watch him backpedal and apologize and retreat. But something held her back. Maybe it was the way Finn was watching from shortstop, his glove hanging loose at his side. Maybe it was the way Lauren Kensington's expression had shifted to something like satisfaction. Maybe it was her long career that told her this moment needed to be documented, preserved, turned into evidence. A second patrol car pulled into the lot. Sergeant Vance Caldwell emerged, older than Sloane, his uniform crisp and perfectly pressed. He walked with the careful precision of someone who had learned to hide behind procedure, to weaponize policy manuals and departmental regulations. "What's the situation?" Caldwell asked Sloane, not looking at Jada. "Suspicious person call, Captain," Sloane replied. "Subject is uncooperative, refused to provide ID initially, now questioning the legitimacy of the stop." Jada opened her mouth to correct him, to point out that she had asked for clarification before complying, not refused. But Caldwell cut her off with a raised hand. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us for questioning," Caldwell said. "Am I being detained?" Jada asked. The question was precise, legal, the kind that forced officers to commit to a position. "We're conducting an investigation," Caldwell replied, his tone maddeningly neutral. "That's not an answer," Jada said. "Am I free to leave?" Caldwell exchanged a glance with Sloane. The radio at Sloane's shoulder crackled. "Unit be advised, Subject Whitaker has no wants or warrants. Record is clear." For a moment, Jada thought that would be it. Clean record, valid ID, park permit on her phone, proving she had every right to be there. They would hand back her license, maybe warn her about something vague like loitering regulations, and leave. But Sloane stepped closer instead, moving into what any tactical manual would call the intimidation zone. "You're coming with us," he said. "End of story." "On what grounds?" Jada asked. "I've provided identification. I have a clean record. I've explained my presence here. What law have I broken?" "Obstruction," Caldwell said, the word delivered like a verdict. "You're obstructing our investigation." The irony would have been funny if it were not so dangerous. She had asked questions. She had requested clarification. She had complied with every lawful order while politely asserting her rights. And now somehow that compliance had transformed into obstruction. Footsteps pounded across the grass. Jada's heart sank before she even turned her head. Finn was running toward them, his cleats kicking up small clouds of dirt, his face twisted with confusion and fear. "Auntie J," he called out. "What's wrong? What's happening?" Jada held up a hand, trying to stop him, to keep him away from this moment. But he was already there, breathless, looking between her and the officers with wide eyes. "It's okay, baby," Jada said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Just a misunderstanding. Go back to your team." "Son, this does not concern you," Caldwell said to Finn. "Go back to the field." "Field," Jada's voice dropped to ice. "Don't speak to him," she said. It was the first time real authority had leaked into her tone, the first crack in the careful civilian mask she had been wearing. Sloane heard it. His eyes narrowed slightly, something in his posture shifting. "Ma'am, you need to come with us now," he said. "If you refuse, we'll place you under arrest." "For what crime?" Jada asked again. "Resisting arrest," Sloane said. The circular logic laid bare without shame. Later, when the FOIA request came back, Jada would see the full 911 transcript. The audio recording preserving Lauren Kensington's voice saying, "There's a black woman alone at the bleachers. No children with her. She's just staring at the children. It makes me uncomfortable." The dispatcher's note underneath would be even more damning. "Caller is white female. States subject has done nothing illegal but feels unsafe. Advise caller that without criminal activity, police response may be limited." Caller insisted on officer presence. The system had documented its own failure, preserved the moment when fear became weaponized, when discomfort became justification. But that knowledge was still days away. Right now, Jada stood on the bleachers with her nephew watching. Two officers closing in, and the weight of her long career pressing against her ribs like a stone she could not show. Finn grabbed her hand. "I don't understand," he whispered. "You didn't do anything wrong." Jada squeezed his fingers. "I know, baby," she said. "Sometimes that does not matter." Lauren Kensington moved toward the officers with the confidence of someone who knew she had already won. Her white visor caught the sun, her yoga pants pristine despite the dusty field. She carried her phone like a shield, like proof of righteousness. "Officers, thank God you're here," Lauren said, slightly breathless. "I'm the one who called. I was concerned because, well, she's been sitting here alone, and with all the news lately about predators at parks." The words hung in the air, deliberately vague but loaded with implication. Predators, as if Jada's presence alone was threat enough to justify the label. "Ma'am, I'm his aunt," Jada said, keeping her voice level despite the rage building in her chest. "I'm here every time. I'm on the approved adult list for the team." "I've never seen you before," Lauren replied, her tone suggesting concern rather than accusation. But the effect was the same. It was a lie. Jada had documentation proving she had attended consecutive games, had signed in at the field house every time, had her name recorded in the team parent directory. But Lauren delivered the falsehood with such casual certainty that it became truth in the ears of the officers, in the minds of the watching parents. A woman standing near the concession stand, younger than Lauren, with a kind face and a team shirt, spoke up. "Actually, I have seen her," the woman said, her voice tentative. "She's here every week, same spot on the bleachers." Lauren turned, her expression shifting just enough to convey disappointment. "Are you sure?" Lauren asked. "I mean, maybe you're thinking of someone else. There are a lot of people here each week." The younger woman's courage faltered. I think it was her," she said, but her voice had lost its certainty. She took a small step backward, retreating into the safety of the crowd. Jada watched the exchange with clinical detachment. This was how it worked. One person with social capital could reshape reality, could make witnesses doubt what they had seen, could transform weeks of peaceful attendance into suspicious behavior that no one could quite verify. Sloan shifted his weight, his hand still resting on his duty belt. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us," he said to Jada. "We can sort all this out at the station." "Sort what out?" Jada asked. "I have my park permit on my phone. I can show you the confirmation email right now. I'm listed as Finn's legal guardian in the team registry. What exactly needs to be sorted?" "Your attitude, for one thing," Sloan said. Around them, the crowd had grown. Parents who had been watching their children practice had drifted closer, drawn by the spectacle. Jada could feel their eyes on her, could sense the calculations happening in their minds. The police were here. They had received a complaint. The woman must have done something. Otherwise, why would the officers insist on taking her away? Finn's hand tightened in Jada's. "Auntie Jay, I don't want you to go," he whispered. Jada knelt down, bringing herself to eye level with her nephew. "Baby, I need you to go back to your team," she said softly. "Find Coach Bennett. Tell him exactly what's happening here. Tell him I need him to call Ms. Langley." Ms. Langley was Finn's caseworker assigned through the Department of Children and Family Services when Jada had taken custody. The mention of a caseworker would later become another data point in the officer's narrative, another piece of evidence that something about Jada's situation was irregular, suspicious, worth investigating. "But what if they take you?" "Who will come get me?" Finn asked, his voice cracking. "Then Ms. Langley will come get you," Jada said, "and I'll see you later. I promise." It was a promise she was not entirely sure she could keep, but she said it anyway because that was what Finn needed to hear. Coach Bennett, a stocky man in his 50s with a clipboard and a whistle, jogged over from the dugout. "What's going on here?" he asked, looking between Jada and the officers. Police business, Caldwell said. Please step back, sir. Jada is one of our team parents, Coach Bennett said. She's here every week. Is there a problem? We're investigating a complaint, Sloan replied, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. Coach Bennett looked at Jada, his expression torn between wanting to help and not wanting to interfere with police. You want me to call someone? He asked her. Ms. Langley, Jada said. The number's in the team directory. Tell her I'll be delayed picking up Finn. The careful phrasing was deliberate. Delayed, not arrested. As if this were a minor inconvenience, a scheduling conflict, rather than what it actually was. Ma'am, we need to go now, Sloan said, taking a step closer. Jada stood slowly, her movements controlled and deliberate. I'm complying, she said clearly, making sure her words carried to the watching crowd. I'm cooperating fully with your instructions. I'm walking voluntarily. I'm not resisting. She was narrating her own actions, creating a verbal record that would contradict whatever report Sloan would later write. She had learned this technique from defense attorneys, from civil rights activists, from people who had survived encounters with police by making their compliance so explicit that no one could later claim they had been aggressive or threatening. Lauren Kensington had pulled out her phone again, filming the scene. Other parents were doing the same now. A forest of phones raised and recording. Jada caught glimpses of herself in the screens, saw how she must look to them. A black woman being escorted away by police while her nephew cried. Exactly the kind of scene that would be captioned and shared and debated in neighborhood social media groups, transformed into evidence of whatever people wanted to believe about who belonged in their parks and who did not. As they walked toward the patrol cars, Jada's phone buzzed in her pocket. She could feel it vibrating against her hip, could imagine the caller ID showing Agent Elena Voss's name, her supervisor trying to reach her for the weekly check-in they had scheduled. But Sloan had already made it clear she was not allowed to answer. The morning sun felt too bright, too cheerful for what was happening. Birds sang in the trees lining the parking lot. A child's laughter carried from a playground on the far side of the park. The world continued its pleasant rhythm while Jada's life tilted into something else entirely. Behind them, Finn's voice rose above the crowd noise. She didn't do anything. You can't take her. She was just watching me play. Jada did not turn around. Could not turn around. Because if she saw his face, saw the tears she knew were falling, she might do something that would make the situation worse. She might let the careful control slip. She might show exactly how much rage was burning beneath her calm exterior. So she kept walking, kept her shoulders straight, kept her breathing even. She had been trained for worse than this. She had faced armed fugitives and hostile witnesses in situations where one wrong move meant death. She could handle 2 suburban cops with inflated egos and a skewed sense of authority. She could handle it because she had to, because Finn was watching. Because her long career had taught her that sometimes the best weapon was not force, but patience. The system had rules, procedures, chains of custody, and review boards, and oversight mechanisms. They might twist those rules in the moment, but eventually, with the right documentation and the right evidence, the truth would surface. She just had to survive long enough to make that happen. They were halfway across the parking lot when Jada's phone buzzed again, the vibration insistent against her hip. She knew without looking that it was Agent Elena Voss, her supervisor at the U.S. Marshal Service. Their weekly check-in was scheduled and Voss was nothing if not punctual. My phone is ringing, Jada said, stopping. I need to answer it. Keep walking, Sloan said, his hand moving to her elbow. Officer, it's my employer, Jada said. They're expecting my call. If I do not answer, they'll assume something is wrong, which was exactly true. Voss knew Jada's routine, knew she was at Finn's game, knew that missing a scheduled check-in meant either emergency or trouble. The Marshal Service did not take silence lightly from their deputies, especially not ones who worked fugitive apprehension. "You can call them back from the station," Caldwell said, moving to Jada's other side. The two officers flanked her now, a formation designed to control movement, to prevent escape, to demonstrate authority to anyone watching. Jada's phone continued to buzz. "This is a professional call," she said. "I have a right to inform my employer of my location." "You have the right to remain silent," Sloan said with a smirk. "Maybe exercise that one." The phone stopped buzzing. Seconds passed, then it started again. Voss was calling back, which meant she was already concerned, already noting the missed contact in whatever log she kept for her deputies. Jada reached slowly for her pocket, her movements deliberate and visible. "I'm retrieving my phone," she announced. "I'm going to answer this call. I'm not resisting or fleeing. I'm simply exercising my right to contact my employer." "Don't," Sloan warned. Jada's fingers closed around the phone. She had almost pulled it free when Sloane's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was tight, painful, his fingers digging into the tendons. "I said don't," he repeated. "You're hurting me," Jada said, keeping her voice level. "Please release my wrist." Instead, Sloane yanked the phone from her grasp. The movement was aggressive, excessive, the kind of force that left no doubt about his intent to dominate the situation. Jada's phone tumbled through the air, landing on the asphalt with a crack that suggested broken glass. Around them, the parents who had followed from the bleachers gasped. Phones continued recording, capturing the moment when the encounter shifted from uncomfortable to openly hostile. Jada looked down at her phone, then up at Sloane. Her jaw was tight, but her voice remained controlled. "That was an unlawful seizure," she said. "I was not under arrest. I was complying with your instructions to walk to your vehicle. Taking my property by force was not a lawful action." "It's evidence now," Caldwell said, bending to pick up the phone. He examined the cracked screen, then slipped it into an evidence bag he had pulled from his pocket. "Part of our investigation." The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that Jada almost admired its audacity. Her phone was not evidence of anything except their inability to control the narrative, but once it was in that bag, labeled and logged, it became official. It became part of the record that would justify everything they did next. Later, when the body-worn camera footage was finally released through the federal inquiry, it would show all of this in digital clarity. Sloane's body cam mounted on his chest had captured the phone seizure from his perspective. The video would show Jada's controlled breathing, her hands visible and non-threatening. It would show the parents watching from a distance, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern. It would catch the audio of Finn's quiet sob carrying across the parking lot. The sound of a child watching his world tilt sideways. That footage would become evidence. But first it had to survive the retention window, the mysterious technical glitches that plagued inconvenient recordings, the department's careful management of what the public was allowed to see. "I want that phone logged properly," Jada said. "I want a receipt showing it was taken from me, the time it was seized, and the name of the officer who took it." "You'll get your receipt at the station," Caldwell said, "if we decide to give you one." The casual dismissal of procedure was almost breathtaking. Jada had spent her career working within the law, respecting chains of custody, documenting every piece of evidence with meticulous care. She had seen cases fall apart because of sloppy paperwork, because of broken chains, because of officers who thought the rules did not apply to them. And here were two cops demonstrating exactly why those rules existed, why oversight mattered, why trust in law enforcement was eroding with every unlawful seizure and casual violation. "I'm noting the details," Jada said. "Officer Sloan seized my personal phone without a warrant, without probable cause, during what was described as a voluntary interview. Officer Caldwell witnessed and facilitated this seizure." "You done?" Sloan asked. "For now," Jada replied. They reached the patrol car and Caldwell opened the back door. "Watch your head," he said, the courtesy phrase sounding almost mocking given the circumstances. Jada looked back toward the baseball field one last time. Finn stood at the edge of the parking lot, Coach Bennett's hand on his shoulder, his face streaked with tears. Other children had gathered around him, their game forgotten, their morning transformed into a lesson about how quickly safety could become danger, how easily authority could become abuse. Jada climbed into the back of the patrol car, the door slamming shut with the heavy finality of a cell closing. The interior smelled of disinfectant and fear, of all the other people who had sat in the same seat, who had felt the same cage close around them. Her phone was gone. Her ability to contact Voss, to alert the Marshal Service, to document what was happening, all gone. But she had been in worse situations. She had been held by drug cartels who wanted to trade her for their captured associates. She had been in buildings that were about to be raided by rival gangs. She had survived because she knew how to wait, how to watch, how to let the system think it had won, while she gathered every scrap of information that would later become evidence. So she sat in the back of that patrol car and waited for the next move, her mind already cataloging every detail, every violation, every crack in their procedure that she would later use to bring the entire operation down. The patrol car's radio crackled to life as Caldwell slid into the driver's seat. A dispatcher's voice cut through the static, professional and detached. "Unit be advised, Captain Beckett is en route to your location." Sloan, settling into the passenger seat, muttered something under his breath that Jada could not quite catch, but his body language said enough. Shoulders tensing, hand rubbing the back of his neck. The arrival of a supervisor was not what he had wanted. Through the patrol car's metal mesh divider, Jada watched the baseball field. Parents were clustering in small groups now, their phones still out, their conversations animated. Lauren Kensington stood at the center of one group, gesturing as she spoke, building her own narrative, shaping the story before it could shape itself. A third patrol car pulled into the lot, this one unmarked, but clearly official. Captain Nora Beckett emerged, a woman in her early 50s with gray-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun. She wore the kind of permanent expression that came from years of navigating department politics, of learning which battles to fight and which to let slide for the sake of a pension that was finally within reach. Beckett strode toward Caldwell and Sloan with the measured pace of someone annoyed at being pulled into a situation. "What's the issue here?" she asked, her voice carrying across the parking lot. "Suspicious person call," Caldwell read, straightening slightly. "Subject initially refused to provide identification, became argumentative when we attempted to investigate." Jada's jaw clenched. The rewriting of history was already underway. Initially refused had replaced asked for clarification. Argumentative had replaced exercising her rights. The truth was being sanded down, reshaped, made to fit the narrative they needed. "Did she break a law?" Beckett asked, pulling out a small notebook. Sloan hesitated. "Loitering, Captain. Potentially trespassing on park property." "Which one?" Beckett's pen hovered over the paper. "The sign says no loitering," Sloan said, his voice less certain now. "She was sitting alone on the bleachers with no children present." Beckett looked toward the bleachers, then at the yellow sign by the entrance. Jada could see her reading it, noting the restrictions, doing the mental calculation that any competent officer would do. The sign specified restricted hours. It was daytime. The loitering charge would not hold. "And the trespassing?" Beckett asked. "She's uncooperative," Sloan said, pivoting when the legal ground beneath him crumbled. "Aggressive attitude, questioning our authority to conduct a stop." There it was, the real charge, not loitering or trespassing or any actual crime. The charge was attitude. The crime was refusing to accept humiliation quietly. Beckett walked to the patrol car and peered through the window at Jada. Their eyes met, and Jada saw the calculation happening behind the captain's expression. A black woman, leather work bag, well-spoken enough to know her rights, the mention of government work. This could be a problem if handled wrong. Could be a news story. Could be a complaint that went to the mayor's office. But on the other hand, Lauren Kensington was standing right there, along with a dozen other parents who voted in local elections, who attended city council meetings, who donated to campaigns, the kind of constituents who called the mayor directly if they felt unsafe in their own parks. Beckett straightened and walked back to Caldwell. "Take her in for questioning," she said, her voice loud enough for the watching crowd to hear. "We'll sort everything out at the station." "On what charge, Captain?" Jada called through the closed window, making sure her words carried. Beckett turned, her expression carefully neutral. "Obstruction," she said. "You're obstructing our investigation." The circular logic was perfect in its simplicity. They were investigating her suspicious presence. She questioned their right to investigate, therefore she was obstructing. The fact that her questions were legal, that her presence was lawful, that the entire investigation was built on nothing more than one woman's discomfort. None of that mattered. The system had its own momentum now. Jada sat back against the hard plastic seat. She had expected this outcome the moment Beckett arrived and saw the crowd. A captain could not back down in front of constituents, could not admit that her officers had overstepped, could not undermine their authority even when they were clearly wrong. The institution protected itself first. Individual rights came second, if at all. Beckett turned to address the crowd of parents. "Folks, we appreciate your patience," she announced, her voice carrying authority and false reassurance in equal measure. "We're just following up on a legitimate concern. There's no danger. Please return to your activities." Some parents drifted back toward the bleachers, their curiosity satisfied, their faith in police authority reaffirmed. Others lingered, still filming, still watching. Jada caught sight of Coach Bennett on his phone, presumably calling Ms. Langley as she had requested. Finn stood beside him, small and alone despite being surrounded by people. The patrol car's engine started and they pulled out of the parking lot. Jada watched through the rear window as the baseball field receded, as Finn became a small figure among many, as the last piece of her normal morning disappeared from view. The drive to the station took some time. Jada counted the turns, memorized the route. Caldwell drove carefully, obeying every traffic signal, maintaining the speed limit. Sloan typed on a laptop mounted to the dashboard, presumably writing the initial report that would form the foundation of whatever charges they decided to pursue. "Subject displayed hostile behavior from initial contact," Sloan said aloud as he typed his words, half statement and half performance. "Refused to comply with lawful orders, created a disturbance in a public park, demonstrated suspicious interest in minor children." Each word was a nail, a piece of evidence that would later be cited in reports and court documents that would follow Jada through whatever process came next. The fact that none of it was true did not matter. It was official now, documented, part of the record. Jada said nothing. She had worked enough cases to know that anything she said in this car would be used against her. The patrol car's recording system was running, capturing audio though not video. Better to stay silent, to let them build their case on the foundation of lies and procedural violations. Better to wait for the moment when she could present the truth on her terms, with her evidence, in a forum where their words carried no more weight than hers. The station appeared ahead, a low brick building with barred windows and a parking lot full of police vehicles. Home territory for them, hostile ground for her. But Jada had operated in hostile territory before. She knew how to survive until reinforcements arrived, and reinforcements were coming. She just had to wait. The booking area of the station smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a harsh white glow that made shadows look sharper than they should. Caldwell led Jada through a security door, down a corridor lined with holding cells, to a processing desk where a sergeant sat reviewing paperwork. "Voluntary questioning?" the desk sergeant asked, looking up. "Obstruction charge," Caldwell replied. "Subject needs to be processed." The distinction mattered. Voluntary questioning meant Jada could leave at any time, meant she was helping with an investigation rather than being detained against her will. Processing meant fingerprints and photographs and a record that would follow her regardless of whether charges were ever filed. Jada stood with her hands at her sides, her posture relaxed but alert. She had been through booking procedures before, but always on the other side. Always as the officer bringing in a fugitive rather than the person being documented. The reversal was jarring, disorienting in a way that had nothing to do with the physical space and everything to do with the sudden loss of control. "Ma'am, I need you to empty your pockets," the desk sergeant said, sliding a plastic tray across the counter. Jada complied, placing her keys and wallet in the tray. Her hands moved slowly, deliberately, making sure every gesture was visible and unthreatening. "That's everything," she said. "The bag, too," Sloane said from behind her. Jada lifted her leather work bag and set it on the counter. The desk sergeant unzipped it, his hands moving through the contents with practiced efficiency. Phone charger, notepad, pens, a protein bar, sunglasses, and then his hands found the leather case in the interior compartment. "What's this?" the sergeant asked, pulling it out. "Personal item," Jada said, keeping her voice neutral. The sergeant opened the case and Jada watched his expression change. The gold star inside was visible through the clear window, along with the official credential card beneath it. United States Marshal Service, Deputy U.S. Marshal. Jada Whittaker, Northern District of Illinois. For a moment, nobody moved. The sergeant's eyes went from the credential case to Jada's face and back again. Caldwell stepped closer, looking over the sergeant's shoulder, and Jada saw the exact moment when comprehension hit him. The way his jaw tightened, the way his hand moved unconsciously to his collar, as if his uniform had suddenly become too tight. "I'll need to catalog this," the sergeant said, his voice carefully neutral. He closed the case and set it aside, not logging it in the evidence sheet, not documenting its presence. Jada noted the omission, filed it away with all the other violations she was accumulating. "Let's move this along," Caldwell said, recovering his composure. "We need to get her processed and into an interview room." The sergeant nodded, but his hands were less certain now as he continued inventorying Jada's belongings. He had just seen federal credentials. He knew, even if Caldwell was trying to ignore it, that this situation had become complicated in ways that went beyond a simple obstruction charge. "Turn around, please," Sloane said to Jada. "Hands behind your back." "I'll walk voluntarily," Jada said, not moving. "There's no need for restraint. I've complied with every instruction. I'm not a flight risk. I'm not violent. Handcuffs are not necessary." "Not your call," Sloane replied, pulling the cuffs from his belt. Jada kept her hands visible, kept her voice steady. "Officer, I'm stating for the record that I'm complying voluntarily. Restraints are not required for my cooperation." Sloane grabbed her right wrist, his grip unnecessarily rough. His fingers dug into the tendons hard enough to hurt, hard enough to make Jada's hand go momentarily numb. It was pain compliance, a technique designed to force submission through discomfort, and it triggered something in Jada's training, something deeper than conscious thought. Her arm rotated smoothly, a joint lock reversal executed with the kind of muscle memory that came from thousands of hours of practice. The movement was not aggressive, was not an attack, but it broke Sloane's grip and left her wrist free. It happened in less than a second, fast enough that Sloane stumbled backward slightly, his face flushing with surprise and anger. "She's resisting!" Sloane shouted loud enough for anyone in the station to hear. "Subject is physically resisting arrest." "I'm not resisting," Jada said, her voice cutting through his accusation with clear precision. You're using excessive force. My hands are visible. I'm not fleeing. I'm not attacking. You grabbed my wrist with unnecessary force, and I adjusted my position. That's not resistance. That's self-protection. She was narrating her actions, creating an audio record that would contradict whatever report they filed later. Her hands remained at her sides, clearly visible, no threat to anyone. But Sloane's pride had been wounded, his authority challenged, and that was more dangerous than any physical resistance could have been. Turn around, Sloane demanded. Now. Jada turned slowly, keeping her movements controlled. Sloane moved in fast, yanking her arms behind her back with enough force to strain her shoulders. The handcuffs clicked shut, and Jada felt the metal bite into her wrists. Too tight. Deliberately too tight. These are too tight, she said clearly. They're cutting off circulation. I'm requesting that they be loosened and that I receive a medical evaluation on record. Noted, Caldwell said from across the room. But he did not move to adjust the cuffs, did not call for medical, did not document her request in any visible way. The word was empty, a performance of procedure without any actual follow-through. Pain radiated up Jada's arms from where the metal dug into her wrists. She could feel her fingers starting to tingle, the first warning sign of restricted blood flow. But she kept her breathing steady, kept her voice calm, kept demonstrating the kind of control that they apparently lacked. As they walked her toward the holding area, Jada spoke again, her words delivered with the kind of precision that came from hearing them read aloud hundreds of times in courtrooms and interrogation rooms. I'm invoking my right to remain silent, she said. I request an attorney. I do not consent to any searches of my person or property beyond what is necessary for safety during booking. The Miranda warnings delivered perfectly without hesitation, without the stammering confusion that most civilians showed when trying to remember their rights under pressure. Sloane stopped walking, staring at her with an expression that mixed suspicion with something like unease. How the hell do you know that? He muttered. Jada said nothing. She had already invoked her right to silence. Anything she said now could only hurt her case. But the question hung in the air between them, adding to the growing list of things about her that did not fit the narrative they had constructed. Through the station's main entrance, Jada heard a commotion, raised voices, someone demanding to know where Jada Whittaker was being held. She recognized the voice even before she saw its owner. Miss Langley, Finn's caseworker, was standing at the front desk with Coach Bennett beside her. I have a young boy whose guardian has been arrested, Ms. Langley was saying, her voice sharp with professional authority. I need to know the charges, and I need to know them now. That child is standing outside in the parking lot without supervision, and he's terrified. Jada's chest tightened. Finn. She had told him to call Ms. Langley, but she had not wanted him to have to wait, had not wanted him to spend even a minute wondering if his aunt was coming back. His mother was already in prison, the fear of losing another adult, of being truly alone. That fear must be overwhelming him right now. Ma'am, we're processing the suspect, the front desk officer was saying to Ms. Langley. You'll need to wait until booking is complete. That suspect is a legal guardian with a child in state custody. Ms. Langley shot back. You do not get to take your time while a minor is in crisis. Where is she? The door to the booking area opened and Ms. Langley's eyes found Jada immediately. The caseworker's expression shifted from anger to something more complex when she saw the handcuffs, saw the too tight grip that was leaving Jada's hands pale, saw the careful control Jada was maintaining despite everything. Jada, are you all right? Ms. Langley asked. I've invoked my right to remain silent and requested an attorney, Jada replied. Please make sure Finn gets home safely. The spare key is in the magnetic box under the mailbox. Feed him lunch. Tell him I'll see him later. Even now, even in handcuffs, Jada's first priority was making sure Finn was taken care of. Ms. Langley nodded, understanding the subtext. Jada was not admitting guilt. She was not asking for help for herself. She was doing what she had always done, putting Finn first. "I'll take care of him," Ms. Langley said. "And I'm calling your attorney. This is not how legal guardians are supposed to be treated." Sloane pulled Jada toward the holding cells before she could respond. The corridor stretched ahead of them, fluorescent lights reflecting off polished floors, each step taking her further from the world where she had authority and control, deeper into a system that had decided she was a threat. But even as they locked her in a holding cell, even as the metal door clanged shut and she was left alone in the small space with its single bench and concrete walls, Jada's mind was working. She was cataloging evidence, noting violations, building the case that would eventually dismantle theirs. They had taken her phone, but they had not found the small recording device clipped to her shirt collar, the one that looked like an ordinary pen. And Bud had been capturing audio since the moment Sloane first approached her at the baseball field. Everything was being documented. Everything would eventually surface. They thought they had won by getting her into a cell. They had no idea the war had just begun. Several hours passed in this holding cell. Jada counted them by the rhythm of the station around her. The shift change brought new voices, different footsteps. The lunch delivery cart squeaked past her door. Someone in another cell was singing off-key and repetitive until a guard told them to shut up. Jada sat on the concrete bench, her wrists still aching from the too tight handcuffs they had finally removed. Her shoulders hurt from being forced back during the arrest, but the physical discomfort was manageable. She had endured worse during training exercises, during fugitive captures that went sideways. During the time a methamphetamine cook had broken her ribs with a pipe before she had taken him down. What bothered her more was the silence. No phone, no contact with the outside world, no way to reach Agent Voss to explain why she had missed their check-in, to activate the protocols that would bring federal attention to this situation. She was isolated, cut off exactly where Caldwell and Sloane wanted her, but they had made mistakes. She could feel it in the way they had avoided logging her credential case, in the nervous energy that had filled the booking area after the desk sergeant opened it, in the delay before anyone came to question her. They knew they had arrested someone who did not fit their usual pattern, and they were trying to figure out how to handle it. In the evidence locker down the hall, Jada's phone began to ring. The sound was muffled by the plastic evidence bag, but loud enough that the officer stationed near the locker looked up from his magazine. The screen lit up, clearly visible through the clear bag. The caller ID displayed in white letters, DOJ Voss. The officer stared at the phone for a moment, then quickly walked to the booking desk. "Sarge," he called out, "we got a problem." "What kind of problem?" he asked. "The phone from the park arrest, it's ringing. Caller ID says Department of Justice." The sergeant's expression shifted immediately. He stood, walked to the evidence locker, and peered at the screen through the plastic bag. Jada's phone was still ringing, still displaying Voss's name and title. "Shit," the sergeant muttered. He grabbed his desk phone and dialed an internal extension. "Sergeant Caldwell, you need to come to booking right now," he said. "We have a situation with the Whitaker arrest." Minutes later, Caldwell appeared, his uniform slightly rumpled from whatever he had been doing. "What's the situation?" he asked. The desk sergeant pointed to the evidence bag. "Her phone's been ringing for some time. Department of Justice. Same caller, multiple attempts." Caldwell stared at the phone as it rang again, Voss's name appearing once more on the screen. "Could be anyone," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Could be a scam call." "Could be. It says DOJ," the sergeant interrupted, "and it's calling back repeatedly. That's not a scam pattern. That's someone trying to reach her urgently." Caldwell pulled out his own phone and typed something, presumably researching, trying to figure out how deep the problem went. His face went pale as he read whatever appeared on his screen. "Call Captain Beckett," he said. "Tell her we may have arrested a federal employee. The words hung in the air of the booking area, transforming the atmosphere from routine to crisis in an instant. A federal employee meant oversight, meant potential investigations, meant the kind of scrutiny that could end careers. What none of them knew, what they could not have known, because they had been too focused on dominance and control to notice details, was that the small pin clipped to Jada's shirt collar was not just a pin. It was a recording device purchased legally, used within the bounds of one-party consent law. The device had activated the moment Sloan first said, "You need to leave this park now." Every word since then had been captured, digitized, and uploaded to a secure cloud server. In real time, the recording held everything. Sloane's initial approach without reasonable suspicion, Jada's calm request for clarification, the phone seizure, the excessive force during handcuffing, her precise recitation of Miranda rights. Every violation, every procedural error, every moment of their overreach had been documented with audio clarity that no report could contradict. The evidence was already backed up in 3 separate locations. The cloud server, Jada's personal encrypted drive that synced automatically, and the Marshal Service's secure file system, which received copies of all recordings made by deputies in the field as part of their duty logs. Even if they found the device now, even if they destroyed it, the recordings were beyond their reach. But they did not know that yet. They were still operating under the assumption that they controlled the narrative, that their reports would be the official version, that Jada was just another civilian who would learn the hard way not to challenge police authority. Officer Quentin Reyes appeared in the booking area, his young face troubled. He was still relatively new to the force, still idealistic enough to be bothered by what he had witnessed at the park. "Sarge," he said to Caldwell, "I need to talk to you about the Whitaker arrest." "Not now, Reyes," Caldwell replied, still focused on his phone. "It's important," Reyes insisted. "I looked her up. She's listed in the federal directory, Deputy U.S. Marshal, Northern District of Illinois." The words landed like a bomb. The desk sergeant stopped typing. Caldwell's head snapped up. Even the officer who had first noticed the phone ringing turned to stare. "What did you say?" Caldwell asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Jada Whitaker," Reyes repeated. "Federal Employee Directory. She's been a deputy marshal for her entire career, Fugitive Apprehension Unit. I pulled her service record through the law enforcement database. She's legitimate." "Why the hell did not you check this before we brought her in?" Caldwell demanded. "You did not ask me to," Reyes replied. "You and Sloan handled the whole thing. I was just there as backup. But when I saw her credential case during booking, I got curious, so I checked." Caldwell turned to the desk sergeant. "Did you log that credential case?" he asked. The sergeant's silence was answer enough. The credential case sat on a shelf behind the booking desk, visible but undocumented, as if pretending it did not exist would somehow make it disappear. "Get Captain Beckett on the phone," Caldwell said. "Now." While they scrambled, while panic spread through the booking area like a virus, Jada sat in her holding cell and waited. She could hear the raised voices, could sense the shift in energy even through the thick metal door. Something had changed. Someone had figured out who she was, or at least part of it. The system was starting to crack. Her phone rang again in the evidence locker. Voss was not giving up. She would keep calling, keep trying, keep escalating until someone told her where her deputy was and why she was not answering. The Marshal Service did not abandon its own. They had learned that lesson the hard way over decades of losing people in the field, of leaving families without answers. When a deputy went silent, the entire apparatus of federal law enforcement started moving. And it was moving now whether Caldwell and Sloan realized it or not. The clock was ticking. The recordings were stored. The evidence was mounting. Every minute they kept her in the cell was another nail in the case that would eventually dismantle their careers. Jada leaned back against the concrete wall and allowed herself a small, cold smile. They had wanted to teach her a lesson about knowing her place, about accepting humiliation quietly. Instead, they had given her exactly what she needed: documentation, witnesses, a clear pattern of rights violations that even the most department-friendly review board could not ignore. The war was not over, but the first battle was already won. Captain Beckett arrived at the station some time later, her expression carefully controlled, but her movements sharp with irritation. She went directly to the booking area where Caldwell and the desk sergeant waited with the kind of nervous energy that came from knowing a situation had spiraled beyond their control. "Show me everything," Beckett said, not bothering with pleasantries. The desk sergeant laid out Jada's belongings on the counter. The wallet, the keys, the phone in his evidence bag, still showing missed calls from Agent Voss, and finally the leather credential case open to display the gold star and federal ID card. Beckett picked up the case, studying it with the practiced eye of someone who had spent nearly 3 decades in law enforcement. She knew what a federal credential looked like, knew the weight and heft of it, knew that faking one was a federal crime that people rarely attempted. "This was real. You arrested a deputy U.S. Marshal," she said, her voice flat with the kind of controlled fury that was more dangerous than shouting. "For obstruction at a children's baseball game?" "Captain, we did not know," Caldwell started. "She did not identify herself, did not show credentials." "She did not have to identify herself," Beckett interrupted. "She was not committing a crime. You had no grounds for the stop, let alone an arrest." She set down the credential case and picked up Jada's phone, noting the caller ID still visible on the screen. "And you've been ignoring calls from her supervisor at the Department of Justice for some time," Beckett continued. "Do you have any idea what kind of investigation this is going to trigger?" The desk sergeant and Caldwell exchanged glances. "We were trying to verify her employment," Caldwell said weakly. "For some time?" Beckett's voice dripped with skepticism. "You could have called the U.S. Marshal Service quickly. You could have checked the federal law enforcement database. Instead, you held a federal officer without cause, denied her access to communication, and violated approximately a dozen procedural requirements." She pulled out her phone and dialed. "This is Captain Nora Beckett, District 3, she said when someone answered. "I need to speak with whoever is supervising Deputy Jada Whitaker immediately." "Yes, I'll hold." The wait stretched before Beckett's posture changed slightly. "Agent Voss," she said. "This is Captain Beckett. I'm calling regarding Deputy Whitaker. She's currently in our custody following an incident at City Park." Even from across the room, Caldwell could hear Agent Voss's response, the sharp edge of authority in her voice demanding answers. "Yes, ma'am, she's unharmed," Beckett said. "No, ma'am, no charges have been filed yet. We're currently reviewing the circumstances. Yes, I understand this is a federal matter. I'll have her released immediately and we can discuss the details." Beckett ended the call and turned to face Caldwell with an expression that promised consequences. "Release her," she said. "Now. And pray that the U.S. Marshal Service does not decide to make an example out of this department." While they processed Jada's release, while they gathered her belongings and prepared the paperwork that would pretend this had all been a reasonable mistake, some distance away, a man was working on his own investigation. Reverend Isaiah Ford sat at his desk in the basement of New Hope Baptist Church, surrounded by file folders and spreadsheets that represented months of careful documentation. The Reverend had been tracking incidents at City Park since the previous spring, when 3 families from his congregation had reported being questioned by police during their children's games. All 3 families were black. All 3 had been accused of loitering or suspicious behavior. All 3 had been released without charges after providing identification and explaining their legitimate presence. But the pattern bothered Reverend Ford. He had started keeping records, noting dates and times, collecting names of families who had been stopped, documenting which officers responded to the calls. The spreadsheet on his computer screen now held entries describing black individuals questioned while attending children's sporting events, The pattern was not just clear, it was damning. He saved the file and attached it to an email addressed to the ACLU's Civil Rights Division. The subject line read, "Systematic harassment at City Park. Request for investigation." I had been gathering evidence for months, waiting for the right moment to act. The news of Jada Whittaker's arrest, which had already spread through the community via text messages and social media posts, told him that moment had arrived. Back at the station, Jada was finally led from her holding cell. The handcuffs stayed off this time. Caldwell walked ahead of her without making eye contact. His earlier aggression replaced by careful distance. They returned to the booking desk where her belongings waited in a clear plastic bag. "Sign here," the desk sergeant said, sliding a property receipt across the counter. Jada scanned the document before signing. Everything was listed except the credential case. "My federal credentials," she said. "They are not on the receipt." The desk sergeant reached behind the counter and added the leather case to the pile of belongings. "Administrative oversight," he muttered, not meeting her eyes. Jada picked up the case and clipped it to her belt where it belonged. "I want copies of all reports filed regarding my detention," she said. "Body-worn camera footage from all officers present, radio communications logs, and the 911 call that initiated the response." "You'll need to file a formal request," Caldwell said. "I'm filing it now," Jada replied. "Consider this your verbal notification that I'm requesting all records related to case number under both the Freedom of Information Act and as a federal law enforcement officer conducting an investigation into civil rights violations." The legal language landed like stones. FOIA requests had timelines and penalties for non-compliance. Federal investigations had jurisdiction that superseded local authority. Jada was putting them on notice that this was not over, that the arrest was just the beginning of a much longer process. "You're free to go." Caldwell said the words clearly costing him something. Jada collected her belongings, checking each item. Phone with cracked screen, wallet, keys. She powered on the phone, ignoring Caldwell's presence as she scrolled through the missed calls. From Agent Voss, from Ms. Langley, from a number she did not recognize. The voicemail icon showed new messages. The station's front door opened and Ms. Langley entered with Finn beside her. The boy's eyes were red from crying, his little league uniform dirty from sitting on the ground, his hand clutching the caseworker's with desperate strength. "Auntie J." Finn broke free and ran to her, wrapping his arms around her waist with enough force to make her stumble back a step. Jada knelt down, holding him tight, feeling his shoulders shake with silent sobs. "I'm okay, baby," she whispered. "I'm right here. I'm okay." "They said you might not come back," Finn said against her shoulder. "They said people who get arrested sometimes do not come home." "Who said that?" Jada asked, though she could guess. "The kids at the field after you left. They were saying things about you, about us. Coach Bennett made them stop, but I heard them." Jada pulled back just enough to look at Finn's face. "Listen to me," she said. "I'm here. They cannot keep me from you. I did not do anything wrong, which means I'll always come back. Always. Do you understand?" Finn nodded, but his grip did not loosen. Ms. Langley approached, her professional composure barely masking her anger. "We need to talk," the caseworker said to Jada, "about what happened, about why a legal guardian was detained without notification to child services." "Not here," Jada replied, standing and taking Finn's hand. "Let's go home first." They walked out of the station together into the afternoon sun that seemed too bright, too cheerful for what had happened. Jada's car was still at the park, but Ms. Langley had driven Finn here in her own vehicle. They would retrieve Jada's car later after Finn was calm, after the immediate crisis had passed. As they reached the parking lot, Jada's phone rang. Agent Voss's name appeared on the cracked screen. Jada answered immediately. "I'm okay," she said before Voss could speak. "I'm out. I'm with my nephew. I'll call you back with a full report." "You're suspended from active duty pending review," Voss said, her voice tight with controlled anger that was not directed at Jada. Standard protocol when an officer is arrested. But Jada, we're going to fight this. The entire service is behind you. I know, Jada said. Thank you. She ended the call and looked down at Finn, at his tear-streaked face and confused eyes. She had spent her career hunting people who had evaded justice. Now she was hunting justice itself and the people who thought they were above it. Some days after her arrest, Jada sat in a small conference room at the county's internal affairs office. The room was windowless, painted in institutional beige with a long table dividing the space between her and the investigator assigned to review the incident. A recording device sat in the center of the table, its red light blinking steadily. Across from her sat investigator Garrett Hayes, a neutral third party from the County Oversight Board. He was gray-haired with the tired eyes of someone who had reviewed too many complaints and found most of them led nowhere. Behind him against the wall sat Sergeant Caldwell. The department had allowed him to be present, a courtesy that Jada knew was really about controlling the narrative. Ms. Whitaker, Hayes began, opening a manila folder. You stated in your initial complaint that you are a federal employee. Can you provide documentation of that claim? Jada had been waiting for this moment. She had spent days preparing, gathering evidence, organizing the documentation that would transform this from a simple, she said dispute into something much larger. She reached into her bag and pulled out the leather credential case, placing it on the table between them. Hayes picked it up, opened it, and his expression shifted immediately. The gold star gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The credential card beneath it showing Jada's photo, her name, her title. United States Marshals Service, Deputy U.S. Marshal. Jada Whitaker, Fugitive Apprehension Unit, Northern District of Illinois. You're a federal law enforcement officer, Hayes said, his voice careful, neutral, but his eyes had sharpened with new attention. I've been a Deputy U.S. Marshal for my entire career, Jada replied. I hold a top-secret security clearance. I've served on over federal warrants. I've testified in federal court many times. My record is spotless. Hayes examined the credential case more closely, checking the hologram, the serial number, the official seals that marked it as genuine. Why did not you identify yourself during the initial encounter? He asked. Because I was not required to, Jada said. I was not on duty. I was attending my nephew's baseball game as a civilian. I had committed no crime. I had no obligation to present federal credentials during an unlawful stop. Caldwell shifted in his chair, and Hayes glanced back at him before returning his attention to Jada. The officer's report states you became argumentative and refused to cooperate. Hayes said that you created a disturbance and had to be detained for everyone's safety. Jada had expected this. She had read the reports they had filed, the careful construction of lies that painted her as aggressive, suspicious, dangerous, but she had prepared for it. I have audio documentation that contradicts those reports, Jada said. Audio documentation? He repeated. Jada pulled a small device from her bag, setting it on the table. It looked like an ordinary pen, the kind thousands of professionals carried every day. This is a recording device, she explained. I activated it the moment Officer Sloan first approached me at the baseball field. Illinois is a one-party consent state. If you are part of a conversation, you can legally record it. I've been carrying this device for years as part of my fieldwork protocol. She connected the device to a small speaker, also from her bag. This recording has been uploaded to secure cloud storage in 3 separate locations, Jada continued. The U.S. Marshals Service has a copy as part of my duty log. My personal encrypted backup has a copy, and the cloud service provider has a copy with timestamp verification. Even if this device is destroyed, the recordings are preserved and authenticated. Hayes leaned forward, his attention completely focused now. Play it, he said. Jada pressed play. The audio quality was clear, Professionally clean, every word audible. Sloane's voice came through first, that initial command delivered with casual authority. You need to leave this park now. Then Jada's response, calm and measured. Good morning, officer. Can I ask what this is about? The recording played through the entire encounter. Sloane's escalating aggression. Jada's repeated request for clarification. Her calm compliance, even as she questioned the legal basis for the stop. The moment when Sloane seized her phone, the crack of it hitting the pavement audible on the recording. Jada's precise narration of her actions during the handcuffing. Her perfect recitation of Miranda rights. And finally, Sloane's muttered question that revealed how unexpected her knowledge was. How the hell do you know that? When the recording ended, the conference room was silent. Hayes's expression had transformed from neutral skepticism to something harder, more focused. Caldwell had gone pale. His earlier confidence evaporated. Officer Sloane approached you without stating reasonable suspicion, Hayes said, his voice now carrying the tone of someone building a case rather than just reviewing a complaint. He demanded identification without legal basis. He seized your phone through excessive force, and according to this recording, you never became argumentative or created a disturbance. You remained calm and compliant throughout. That's correct, Jada replied. Everything in the officer's reports about my behavior is false. The recording proves it. Caldwell finally spoke up, his voice tight. That recording could be edited, he said. We have no way to verify its authenticity. Jada turned to look at him directly. The recording includes metadata showing continuous capture without interruption, she said. The cloud service provider can verify the upload timestamps. The U.S. Marshal Service has certified it as part of my official duty log, and the device itself can be examined by a forensic expert to confirm it has not been tampered with. She paused, letting that sink in. But if you would like additional verification, she continued, Officer Sloane was wearing a body-worn camera. His footage will show the same events from his perspective. I've already requested that footage through official channels. Hayes made a note on his pad. The body-worn camera footage is being reviewed, he said. We should have it available within the next few days. I'd like to address something else, Jada said, pulling another document from her bag. During my booking, Sergeant Caldwell examined my credential case. He opened it, read it, and then set it aside without logging it in the evidence inventory. That's evidence suppression. That's a deliberate attempt to hide the fact that he knew he had arrested a federal officer. Caldwell's face flushed red. I did not know what it was, he protested. I glanced at it, but I did not have time to. You had hours, Jada interrupted, her voice sharp now. Hours while I was held in a cell. Hours during which my supervisor at the Department of Justice called my phone many times. Hours during which you failed to notify federal authorities that one of their officers was in custody. That's not an oversight, that's intentional. Hayes's pen moved rapidly across his notepad. Ms. Whitaker, he said. Or should I say Deputy Whitaker, these are serious allegations. Evidence suppression, false arrest, excessive force, failure to notify federal authorities. You understand that if these claims are substantiated, we are looking at potential federal charges against the officers involved. I understand exactly what we are looking at, Jada replied. I have worked law enforcement for my entire career. I know what happens when officers abuse their authority. I know the system is designed to protect them. But I also know that when you have evidence this clear, this documented, this irrefutable, the system has to respond. She pulled out another document. This one several pages stapled together. This is my formal complaint, she said, sliding it across to Hayes. It details every violation, every procedural error, every unlawful action taken during my detention. It includes timestamps, witness names, and references to the relevant statutes and policies that were violated. Hayes accepted the document, scanning the first page. This is comprehensive, he said. I've written enough incident reports to know what documentation looks like, Jada replied. And I want to be clear about something. This is not just about me. This is not just about one wrongful arrest at a baseball field. She pulled out the final item from her bag, a USB drive. This drive contains a Freedom of Information Act request I filed for all 911 calls related to City Park over the past period, she said. The city clerk's office provided the recordings days ago. I've listened to all of them. She placed the drive on the table. Entries of suspicious person calls, Jada continued. Of them described black individuals. Most calls came from the same small group of residents. The dispatch notes show that in almost all cases, responding officers found no criminal activity and released the subjects without charges. Hayes picked up the drive, turning it over in his hands. You are suggesting a pattern of racial profiling, he said. I'm not suggesting anything, Jada replied. The data speaks for itself. Someone in that neighborhood has been weaponizing 911 calls to harass black families, and the police department has been responding without questioning the pattern, without examining whether these calls represent legitimate concerns or discriminatory harassment. Caldwell stood abruptly. This is absurd, he said. We respond to all calls. We are required to investigate complaints. We cannot just ignore concerned citizens. Oh, concerned citizens, Jada interrupted, do not make calls about people who are doing nothing illegal. Concerned citizens do not systematically target one demographic group. This is not community policing. This is harassment under color of law. Hayes held up a hand. Sergeant Caldwell, please sit down, he said. Deputy Whitaker, I'm going to need to review all of this evidence, the recording, the 911 logs, your formal complaint. This investigation is now being expanded beyond the initial incident to examine potential systemic issues. There is one more thing, Jada said. She pulled out her phone. The screen still cracked from where Sloan had knocked it to the ground. I need to show you something that happened after you released me. She opened her email and turned the phone so Hayes could see the screen. This email arrived days ago, she said. No return address, sent through an anonymous remailer. The subject line says you should drop this. Hayes leaned closer to read the email text. Are you being threatened? He asked. Read it yourself, Jada replied. The email was brief, its message clear despite the attempt at vague language. Deputy Whitaker, pursuing this complaint will not end well for you or your family. Consider what is best for your nephew. The community has long memories. Think carefully before you proceed. Hayes sat back in his chair, his expression grim. This is witness intimidation, he said. Have you reported this to your federal supervisors? I've reported it to Agent Voss, my direct supervisor, Jada confirmed. The Marshal Service is treating it as a threat against a federal officer. They are investigating the source. The conference room felt smaller now, the weight of accumulated evidence pressing down on everyone present. Caldwell looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Hayes' expression had shifted from neutral investigator to someone realizing that the case he had expected to be routine paperwork had become something much more significant. Jada gathered her documents, placing them back in her bag with the same methodical care she had used to present them. I want justice, she said. Not just for myself, but for everyone who has been targeted by this pattern. Every black family that has been harassed at that park. Every person who is too afraid or too poor or too worn down to fight back. This investigation will take time, Hayes said. We have procedures, protocols. I know the procedures, Jada interrupted. I have been on the other side of them for my entire career. I know how long they take. I know how they can be delayed, obstructed, buried under bureaucracy. That is why I am not waiting. She stood and Hayes stood with her. What does that mean? He asked. It means I'm taking this public, Jada replied. There is a city council meeting scheduled. It is a public forum. Anyone can speak. I'm going to present all of this evidence there, in front of the council, in front of the press, in front of the community. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what happened and why it matters. The city council chamber was packed beyond capacity. Every seat filled, people standing along the walls, overflow crowds gathering in the hallway outside. News cameras lined this back row, their red recording lights creating a constellation of attention. Jada stood calm near the rear entrance, watching the room fill with faces she recognized and many she did not. Reverend Isaiah Ford had organized the turnout with the efficiency of someone who had spent decades mobilizing communities. He stood near the front, greeting arrivals, directing people to seats. His presence a calm anchor in the growing energy of the room. Beside him, Elena Vargas from the ACLU adjusted her laptop, preparing the presentation that would lay bare months of documented harassment. Finn sat in the third row with Ms. Langley, his Little League uniform replaced by a button-down shirt that made him look older. He waved when he spotted Jada, and she waved back, drawing strength from his presence. He needed to see this, needed to understand that fighting injustice was possible. That speaking truth could shift power, that his aunt had not been arrested because she had done something wrong, but because the system itself was broken. The council members filed in, taking their seats on the raised platform that gave them literal and symbolic elevation above the citizens they supposedly served. Mayor Hargrove sat at the center, his expression already weary, as if he knew this evening would be difficult. To his right, Councilman Bryce Langford adjusted his microphone, his face showing nothing but professional courtesy. But Jada noticed how his eyes kept scanning the crowd, how his fingers tapped nervously against his leather portfolio. Mayor Hargrove brought the gavel down. "This meeting of the City Council is now in session," he announced. "We'll begin with public comment. First speaker is Lauren Kensington." Lauren approached the microphone with the confidence of someone who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. Her white visor was gone, replaced by business casual attire that suggested respectability and concern. "Thank you, Mayor Hargrove," she began. "I called the police to City Park because I was concerned for the safety of the children. We have had issues at that park. And when I saw an unfamiliar woman sitting alone watching the field, I did what any responsible community member would do. I reported a potential threat." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Reverend Ford stood, his voice carrying across the chamber. "What issues?" he asked. "Be specific, Ms. Kensington." Lauren's composure flickered. "Well, there have been suspicious people," she said. "Reports of concerning behavior." "Mean black people," Elena interjected from her seat, "because that is what the data shows." "I did not say that," Lauren protested. "I never mentioned race. This is not about race. It is about safety." Elena stood and approached the presentation screen at the front of the chamber. "Then let us look at the data," she said, opening her laptop. The screen behind the council members lit up with a spreadsheet numbers and categories arranged in neat columns. "This is months of 911 calls to City Park," Elena explained, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had built cases on evidence rather than emotion. "Calls total, all reporting suspicious persons or concerning behavior. Let me break down the demographics." She clicked and a pie chart appeared. The visual was stark, undeniable. "Of those calls," Elena continued, "described black individuals. The remaining calls described Latinx individuals. 0 calls described white subjects as suspicious. 0. The chamber went silent. Even the reporters had stopped typing, their attention fixed on the screen. "Of those calls about black individuals," Elena continued, "were investigated and dismissed as unfounded. No criminal activity, no threatening behavior, just people existing in a public park. The only exception is Jada Whittaker's arrest, which is currently under federal investigation for civil rights violations." Lauren had retreated to her seat, her face flushed. The council members shifted uncomfortably. several looking at papers on their desks rather than at the presentation. Councilman Langford, Elena said, turning to address him directly. Your firm's Safe Neighbor Patrol holds a contract with the city for private security services, correct? Langford cleared his throat, his professional mask firmly in place. That is public record, yes, he replied. My firm provides supplementary security for city parks and facilities. And your firm is paid per incident response? Elena asked. That is standard industry practice, Langford said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. So when 911 calls increase, your revenue increases, Elena stated, clicking to the next slide. A graph appeared showing two lines that tracked together with disturbing precision. This blue line shows the number of suspicious person calls to City Park per month, Elena explained. This red line shows payments to Safe Neighbor Patrol. Notice anything interesting? The correlation was impossible to ignore. Before Langford's contract was signed, City Park averaged calls per month. After the contract, this average jumped, a significant increase. You are profiting from racial profiling, Elena said, her voice sharp with accusation. Every false call, every harassment of black families, every officer responding to baseless complaints generates revenue for your company. You have a financial incentive to keep the calls coming. That is a baseless insinuation, Langford protested, standing now. We respond to legitimate concerns. We do not control who calls 911. But you benefit when they do, Elena replied. Of calls after your contract was signed described people of color are dismissed as unfounded. This is not security. It is a profit scheme built on discrimination. Agent Elena Voss stood from her seat in the middle section. She had been sitting quietly observing, but now her federal authority filled the room with unmistakable weight. The U.S. Marshal Service has referred this matter to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, she announced. We are investigating potential violations under Title United States Code section, deprivation of rights under color of law. This became a federal case the moment Deputy Whitaker was detained without cause. The crowd erupted. Reporters typed frantically. Council members leaned toward each other, whispering urgently. Sloan and Caldwell, sitting in the back corner in civilian clothes, went pale. Captain Beckett tried to regain control. This is an internal matter, she protested. The department is conducting its own investigation. It became federal jurisdiction, Agent Voss replied. When your officers arrested a deputy U.S. Marshal without probable cause, seized her property illegally, and held her without notifying federal authorities, your internal investigation is welcomed, but it does not preclude federal oversight. Mayor Hargrove banged his gavel, trying to restore order. Please, everyone, let us maintain decorum, he said. But the chamber had transformed from a routine council meeting into something more powerful. Jada could feel it in the air, the shift from individual grievance to collective recognition that the pattern was real, documented, undeniable. I'd like to speak, Jada said, moving toward the microphone. The room fell silent as she approached. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the opportunity to transform her personal violation into systemic change. She adjusted the microphone and looked out at the assembled crowd, at the cameras recording every word, at Finn watching her with wide eyes. My name is Jada Whitaker, she began. I'm a deputy U.S. Marshal. For my entire career, I have tracked fugitives, protected witnesses, and served high-risk warrants. I've been shot at, threatened. I have faced down armed criminals without flinching. She paused, letting her credentials settle into the room's consciousness. But nothing prepared me for my nephew's face when I was arrested for watching him play baseball. She continued, her voice carrying an emotion now controlled but genuine. For the first time in his life, he learned that doing everything right would not protect him, that even his aunt, a federal agent, could be treated like a criminal for existing in a public park. This is not about me, Jada said. It is about every black parent who has been told that they are suspicious for attending their child's game. Every grandmother asked for identification while sitting on a bench. Every teenager stopped for loitering on their own street. It is about a system that sees our presence as threat rather than belonging. She looked directly at Lauren Kensington. You called 911 because my presence made you uncomfortable, Jada said. Not because I did anything wrong, not because I threatened anyone, but because you would rather weaponize the police than question your own prejudice. Then she turned to Langford. And you built a business model on that prejudice, she continued. You profit when people like Ms. Kensington call. You profit when officers respond to baseless complaints. You profit from the harassment of families who have every right to be in those parks. You wanted to make me leave, Jada said, her voice rising with controlled passion. You did not. And I am not leaving now. None of us are, because this community deserves better than a system that treats some of its citizens as permanent suspects. The chamber erupted in applause. People stood, some crying, others shouting support. The news cameras captured it all. The moment when one woman's refusal to accept humiliation became a community's demand for justice. Mayor Hargrove let the applause continue for a moment before banging his gavel. Order, please, he said. The council needs to discuss appropriate responses. But Jada knew the real decision had already been made, not by the council, but by the people filling this chamber, by the reporters broadcasting this story, by the federal agents now examining every aspect of the department's practices. The system was being forced to respond, not because it wanted to, but because the evidence was too clear, the witnesses too numerous, the documentation too thorough to ignore. Hayes, the internal affairs investigator, stood from his seat. Mayor Hargrove and members of the council, he said formally, based on the preliminary findings of my investigation, I am recommending that Officer Sloan and Sergeant Caldwell be suspended without pay pending full disciplinary hearings. Captain Beckett's handling of the situation is also under review. Additionally, Hayes continued, I am recommending that the city immediately suspend its contract with Safe Neighbor Patrol pending a full audit of billing practices and incident response patterns. The correlation between increased calls and increased payments requires thorough examination. Langford stood abruptly, gathering his papers. I need to recuse myself from this discussion, he said, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking, due to potential conflicts of interest. The chamber watched him leave, his exit more damning than any accusation. Jada felt something tight in her chest finally begin to ease. Not victory, not yet, but progress, movement. The first cracks in a system that had seemed impenetrable. Sometime after the city council meeting, Jada pulled into the city park with Finn beside her. The morning air held the same warmth as that first encounter, but everything had shifted. She chose her usual spot and killed the engine. You ready, baby? She asked. Finn nodded, gripping his equipment bag tight. What if people are still mean? He asked. Then we deal with it together, Jada replied. This is your team. This is your field. They walked toward the bleachers. Some parents smiled and waved, genuine now. Others looked away quickly, uncomfortable. Lauren Kensington's spot sat conspicuously empty. She had withdrawn her son from the team, claiming the environment had become hostile. The irony was not lost on anyone. Coach Bennett jogged over, relief clear on his face. Jada, glad to see you back, he said as Finn ran to his teammates. Jada climbed to her usual third-row spot. The metal bleacher was cold, familiar, grounding. A patrol car rolled past and Officer Quentin Reyes slowed, nodding respectfully. Marshal, he said, using her correct title. Now on the field, Finn fielded a ground ball cleanly and looked toward the bleachers. Jada waved. His smile was genuine, untainted by the fear from before. That alone made everything worth it. That evening, Jada sat on her couch, watching the local news coverage. The anchor's voice was professionally neutral. Officer Derek Sloan has been suspended without pay, pending a disciplinary hearing next month. Sergeant Vance Caldwell faces preliminary review by Internal Affairs. Captain Nora Beckett announced early retirement yesterday, effective immediately with full pension intact. Jada set down her coffee. Suspended, preliminary, pending, early retirement with pension intact. Every word suggested consequences while delivering as little as possible. Sloan would probably be back within months. Caldwell would get a written reprimand. Beckett would collect of her salary for doing nothing. Her phone buzzed. Officer Quentin Reyes texted. Heard rumors Internal Affairs is closing case soon. Insufficient evidence despite everything. Thought you should know. Jada stared at the screen. They had made noise, forced suspensions, generated headlines, but the machine was already working to minimize damage, to return to normal, to ensure nothing fundamental changed. A knock at the door pulled her attention. Jada checked the security camera. No one there, but an envelope lay on the doormat. Plain white, no return address, hand delivered. Jada pulled on gloves before picking it up. Inside was a single sheet. Most text obscured by thick black redaction bars. Only fragments visible. Safe Neighbor Patrol monthly quota. Langford confirms, expand to Southside Parks. The final line was clear, unredacted, deliberate. They know you have the audit. Watch your back. Someone inside was helping her or threatening her. The metadata would be scrubbed, untraceable. She placed the paper in an evidence bag, documenting it like everything else. But the message had landed. This was not over. Auntie J. Finn appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Why are you still up? Just finishing work, baby, Jada said, sliding the evidence bag away. Bad dream? Finn shook his head, but his expression was troubled. That lady at the park today, he said. The one with the camera, she was taking pictures of us. Well, yeah, I did too. Some people are curious, Jada said carefully. The news made us famous for a while. Will they come after us again? Finn asked, voice small. The police or the people who do not want us there? Jada knelt, taking his hands. Maybe, she said, refusing to lie. But we will be ready and we will not let them win. You promise? Finn asked. I promise we will fight. Jada replied. I cannot promise we will never be scared, but I promise we will not give up. After tucking Finn back in, Jada returned to her kitchen table. The redacted email lay beside her laptop, which showed her ongoing FOIA request for body camera footage from her arrest. That footage had become a problem. The department had released most of Sloan's recording, the part showing Jada calm and compliant. But crucial minutes were missing. Crucial minutes right after Sloan seized her phone when he would have realized his mistake, when he would have discussed with Caldwell how to proceed. The department claimed technical glitch corrupted file, but Jada knew evidence did not just disappear, it was disappeared by someone with access, someone high enough to manipulate the chain of custody. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. The text made her breath catch. The audit named 6 more parks. How far are you willing to go? Jada's finger hovered over the screen. She could reply, engage, try to trace the source or ignore it. Focus on what she had built. Protect Finn from further exposure. Through the window she noticed a car idling across the street. Dark sedan, tinted windows, no visible plates. It had been there watching. Jada moved to the side window for a better view, but the car pulled away smoothly, disappearing before she could get a clear look. Maybe nothing. Maybe surveillance. Maybe another intimidation tactic. She returned to the table. The redacted email spread before her, the unknown number waiting for response. The missing minutes represented a hole in her case, a gap the department could exploit. Jada thought about the audit. 6 more parks. 6 more neighborhoods where families were being harassed. Where 911 calls were weaponized for profit. If she went after them, the retaliation would escalate. Finn would be caught in the crossfire, but if she did not fight, those families would continue to suffer. The pattern would continue. Every time someone backed down, the system learned intimidation worked better than justice. Jada looked at her phone, at the unknown number asking how far she was willing to go. She did not reply, not yet. But she saved the number, documented the time and date. That night, Jada sat at her kitchen table as dawn broke through the windows. The redacted email before her held secrets someone wanted exposed and others wanted buried. The missing footage represented minutes that could prove conspiracy or be dismissed as technical error. The text about 6 more parks suggested a pattern far bigger than one arrest at one baseball field. She had spent her career hunting people who thought they were above the law. She was not going to stop now, just because the people she was hunting wore badges instead of ski masks. Jada opened a new document and began typing a formal request to the Department of Justice for a pattern and practice investigation. Not just her case, the whole system. She did not know if she would win. Did not know if the missing footage would surface or stay buried. Did not know if the anonymous messages were help or threat, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was not leaving and she was not done fighting.